Oh. Oh.
A man arrives and snatches away violently my magazine. Right away, he throws a right punch at me. I block him, and at the same time, I retaliate. I stand up, controlling the man, stepping on the side, and bringing him closer to the bench, controlling his elbow, and making sure that he won't be able to react. From this moment, if I'm sure he can't react anymore, I can take my distance of safety. When you move away, keep an eye on the aggressor so as to feel really safe.
Donc c'est toi, qu'est-ce qui t'arrive toi? Ici. Donc c'est toi, qu'est-ce qui t'arrive toi? Ici.
I see a man approaching me very aggressively. I ask him what's going on. Then he throws a front kick at me. So obviously I dodge it. As I get up, I hit his genitals, which causes him to tip over. I hit his ear like that, and then, making a rotation, I hit here just above the knee like that, so that he falls to the ground. From there, as I think it's safe and that he will not be able to react, at that moment I can take my distance and walk away. A man gets closer to me as I put down my magazine. Immediately he tries to strike with a stick that I block, and I retaliate at the same time. I get up and strike his genitals to destabilize him. Then I hold his wrist firmly. I snatch the stick away from him and I prick his floating ribs. And I throw 2 strikes on his legs. to prevent him from getting up and being able to retaliate and run. From there, I take my distance. An angry man grabs my wrist, and of course, I'm surprised. Immediately, he throws a punch at me. I block it, and at the same time, I hit his sternum. I get up and I hit his carotid, like this. I block him completely on the bench. From there, and very violently, I project his arm to the ground. And I finish by punching twice his ears, and then I take my distance. I'm discreetly threatened by a man on the side. I rotate and at the same time I strike his left forearm. Then I touch his right wrist, which makes the knife fall. From there I control his elbow and I hammer strike his carotid here. Then I get his wrist, I control his elbow and I tip him over, firmly. I lay him down on the ground. From there I strike his elbow here. I control him. I make sure that in the end I master the situation, which allows me to go and get the knife. And then I take my safety distance.
Quoi?
I feel somebody holding me from behind, on my shoulder. I turn around. It's a man who attacks me, who throws a punch at me. I retaliate by blocking him and simultaneously striking his sternum. I also strike his cervical, and there I control his elbow and I bring him to the ground. I strike his elbow to bring his arm to the ground, and I take my safety distance, making sure that he is alone. I'm stopped by a man. I turn around and I see that he throws a front kick. I step back to touch his front kick. I resume my position so as to control his elbow and to strike his throat. And at the same time, I sweep his leg. I control his arm so that he doesn't escape. I strike his ear, I lay him down on the ground, and I control his elbow. I turn him facing down, and I hammer punch his ear. Then I get up, and I look around to make sure he's alone, and then I can take my safety distance.
Ça va, c'est visible. Ça va, c'est visible.
I'm threatened by a man with a baseball bat. I have decided to act, not to wait. I'm going to hit him like this on both his ears. Moving and hammer punching his sternum. I move on the side and I strike his genitals. I control his wrist and his elbow. I bring him to the ground. I control his elbow. And to make sure of my safety, I take support on him before retrieving the baseball bat. After I've recovered the bat, I make sure it's now safe for me to walk away. A man attacks me. What I do is that I control his wrist. I strike his nose to create an imbalance effect going backwards. I hit his genitals with my knee. I keep controlling his wrist, but at the same time I control his elbow. I will bring him to the ground and lay him down. I control his elbow on the ground. I get up and strike his head, and from there I take my safety distance.
Donne ton argent. Ouais, tranquille, tranquille, je vais te donner. On va descendre, je vais te donner. J'ai ma carte bleue. Vas-y, viens. Viens là. Maintenant, je vais te mettre la genoux dépêche-toi. Tout de suite. Donne ton argent. Ouais, tranquille, tranquille, je vais te donner. On va descendre, je vais te donner. J'ai ma carte bleue. Vas-y, viens. Viens là. Maintenant, je vais te mettre la genoux dépêche-toi. Tout de suite.
I'm inside my car and I get threatened by a man with a gun. I pretend to obey because he's very angry and he asks me for money and my wallet. I take the gun by the trigger and push it very strongly against the steering wheel.
Je prends son arme au niveau de la détente. J'effectue une pression très forte.
I recover the barrel of the weapon and I bring him to me as I control him.
De l'arme. Je le ramène vers moi. Comme ça là, je le contrôle.
I open the door, controlling his arm, making sure that he can't escape. I step out of the interior of the vehicle. I control his elbow with the window of the vehicle. I push him back and I recover the other wrist. And it's at this moment that it's safe for me to ask him to kneel.
Et à ce moment-là, en me sentant en sécurité, je lui demande de se mettre à genoux.
I'm here in a waiting position. At the same time, I stay vigilant. A man comes and throws an uppercut, which causes me to move aside in order to get me out of his axis, dodging his uppercut. With this same hand, I strike his face. I strike his face again with the right hand. I control his elbow. I hit the carotid there, and then I kick his genitals. I keep controlling his elbow. I bring him to the ground, and here I finish with my knee on his back, and I strike his face. And only then I take my safety distance.
Si t'arrives, toi, c'est toi qui me regardes. Ben, comment tu sais que je te regarde? Si t'arrives, toi, c'est toi qui me regarde. Ben, comment tu sais que je te regarde?
A man throws a middle kick with his left leg. I block him by moving on the side and by striking his sternum. I throw him to the ground. I rush to first kick him here and then kick his face. And from there I can leave, making sure he's alone and it's safe. I'm walking quietly in a park. I get questioned by a man, and as I turn around, he attacks me with a baseball bat. I dodge by withdrawing backwards. I rush to strike his face. I hit his ear, and with my right leg, I hit him over his knee to make him lose his supporting leg. From there, I hold the baseball bat with my left foot. I retrieve it and I take my safety distance. A man grabs my right arm. To begin with, I hit his genitals with my right foot. I move aside and I strike his face. I control his elbow and at the same time I move forward, low kicking him here on the inside of his leg. Before leaving, I hammer punch his face and I take my distance.
Ton portefeuille.
Non, mais tranquille, attends.
Allez,
je
allez,
descends,
allez,
je vais
allez.
je vais te donner.
Allez.
T'inquiète, je vais te donner.
Descends pas, allez.
Mais je vais te donner, t'inquiète.
Ton portefeuille.
Non, mais tranquille, attends.
Allez,
je
allez,
descends,
allez,
je vais
allez.
je vais te donner.
Allez.
T'inquiète, je vais te donner.
Descends pas, allez.
Mais je vais te donner, t'inquiète.
I'm threatened by a man inside my car.
Je suis menacé par un
He
individu
asks me
qui
for my wallet.
il me demande mon
I
portefeuille.
pretend to obey and I ask him to calm
Je lui demande
down.
de se calmer.
At that moment, I retaliate by clearing off his arm,
En effectuant un
pushing it
dégagement,
against the steering wheel.
en ramenant son
I
bras
put a strong
vers mon
pressure to
volant.
retrieve the knife,
Je mets une forte
but I still
pression pour
hold
récupérer
his
le
arm
couteau.
with the knife.
Mais je maintiens toujours son bras avec ce couteau.
I
j'ouvre
open
la
my
porte.
door and I push
D'accord, et
with
je
my
le pousse
foot,
avec mon pied, mais je
but I
maintiens
still
toujours à
keep
l'intérieur de
him
ma fenêtre.
inside my window.
Je sors
I get out of the car and I pull him towards me
et
while
je
closing
tire
the
par
door,
le montant de la porte,
doing an elbow lock with the
en
door.
faisant une clé de coude avec le montant de la porte. Sur un arrêt de bus,
I'm at a bus stop.
l'individu
A man
arrive
arrives
vers moi
and attacks
déterminé.
me.
Il
He
déclenche le
throws a
crochet,
hook at me.
j'effectue un blocage
I
frappe en
block
même
him
temps.
and I
En
strike
me
at the same
déplaçant,
time,
je le
moving on the
repousse
side.
sur le poteau du bus.
I push him against
D'accord.
the bus post.
J'effectue une patte de tigre
I do a
revers,
tiger claw strike
frappe
and a
génitale.
backhand punch.
D'accord. Je
I
récupère
strike
sa
his
tête au niveau de
genitals.
la
I
nuque.
grab his head by the neck.
J'effectue un
I hit
coup
his
de
jaw with my
genou
knee.
au niveau de la mâchoire.
I strike him above
Une
the knee.
frappe haute du
I
genou.
rotate
J'effectue
him
une rotation.
and I finish with a low kick
Et je termine
inside.
par un low kick
And then
intérieur.
I take my safety distance.
Et ensuite, je prends mes distances de sécurité.
I get assaulted by surprise from behind. I turn around and I strike his genitals. I also hit his ear with my elbow. A third strike in the cervical, and a last strike on his face with my hand. And I finish with a low kick inside to ensure my retaliation. And from there I can walk away. I'm in a park and there's a guy on my right holding a stick. He tries to hit my legs. I step backwards and simultaneously I move forward and hit his face. I control his elbow and I sweep his leg so that I can make him fall to the ground. I finish with a strike in the face and I recover the stick to ensure my safety. A man approaches me and grabs me with both his arms. With the same pressure that he puts into it, I lean on my leg. I strike his genitals, here, very firmly. And from there I control his arm. And that will offer me an opening here. And I get his head and his neck and I place them under my armpits. From there, indeed, on my legs, I put pressure going down. At the same time, I rotate him to take him to the ground. I put him on the ground, and I finish with a punch at his face. Then I can take my safety distance.
Toi, tranquille, qu'est-ce qui t'arrive là? Attends. À genoux, dépêche-toi, à genoux. Toi, tranquille, qu'est-ce qui t'arrive là? Attends. À genoux, dépêche-toi, à genoux.
I've approached my car and looking for my keys when suddenly I get threatened by a person with a gun who asks for my keys. I pretend to obey. I rotate myself, surprising him, and striking him on the genitals.
J'effectue une rotation en le surprenant et en effectuant une frappe génitale.
I control his elbow and his hand, so to avoid that he fires the weapon, a backhand punch to the ear. I control his elbow and get closer to him. I recover the weapon by the barrel. I bring him close to the door of my car. I distance myself and ask him to kneel. I'm inside my car and I get threatened by a man who throws a punch. I dodge it right away. I place his elbow against the door jamb on the inside. I push the door with my foot, but I hold his wrist to keep him controlled. I get out of the car, still controlling his arm at the door jamb. I get his other arm, and I control him by the wrist, and I take him to the ground. I get him under control. I hammer punch his ear, I strike his floating ribs, and I take my safety distance. All of a sudden, a man grabs me by the neck to strangle me and bring me to the ground. So what I do is that I move my left hand as close of his head as possible, putting one of my fingers in his eye. And there, with my knee and a force of rotation, I put a pressure to make him lose balance and bring him to the ground. From there, I make a first strike here, a second strike there, and to finalize and ensure my safety, a third in the face. And there, I take my distance. I feel a hand on my right shoulder. The man pulls me towards him, and I see that he attacks me with a stick. Simultaneously, I'm going to block him and strike his sternum. I control his wrist. I also hit his genitals to properly control the man. I get the stick, and I prick his floating ribs. From there, first, I strike his legs, and to make sure, I strike him again, to really put him on the ground, and then I take my distance of security and make sure that there's nobody with him. A man comes and grabs me by the hair. I move backwards and strike his genitals first, here. A second strike, then at the same time a third strike at the face. I get his head, I rotate it, and I throw him to the ground. From there, I make sure he's alone, and then I run away.
À partir de là, je m'assure qu'en fin de compte, qu'il soit bien seul et je peux prendre la fuite.
Passe-moi les clés de ta bagnole.
J'ai pas, tranquille. Non, mais t'énerve pas, tranquille. Mais j'ai pas de voiture, déjà d'une.
Donne-moi les clés quand même. Passe-moi les clés de ta bagnole.
J'ai pas, tranquille. Non, mais t'énerve pas, tranquille. Mais j'ai pas de voiture, déjà d'une.
Donne-moi les clés quand même.
I am threatened by a man with a knife. He asks for my car keys, and as I put my glasses down, I try to calm the situation, but he keeps insisting. Starting from there, I dodge by controlling his elbow and striking simultaneously his genitals.
J'effectue une esquive en contrôlant son coude, en frappant simultanément au niveau de ses génitales.
The man is surprised, so he finds himself near the bench, practically on the ground. I control his elbow and his wrist. He still holds the knife, but if ever the knife had fallen, I'd make sure that the man could not retaliate. Then I recover the weapon. I get my glasses and I take my distance.
À partir de là, je récupère l'arme blanche, je récupère mes lunettes et je prends mes distances. Je te dis que t'es un mytho, je te dis que... Je te dis que t'es un mytho, je te dis que...
A man sitting next to me throws a slap at me. What I do is that I react by blocking his forearm and simultaneously I hit his carotid. I hit him again on the plexus. I lift myself by controlling his wrist and his elbow, and I lay him down on the bench. I hold his wrist while changing the hand, and from there I kick his genitals with the back of my foot like this, and then violently I throw his arm down to the ground and take my distance. I get assaulted by a man who strangles me on the side. I rotate, I grab his wrist, and I simultaneously strike his plexus. I keep controlling his wrist, and at the same time I strike his carotid and genitals. From there, I'm controlling the man, so I kick his face like this with my heel, and I bring him to the ground. I control him on the ground, and I finalize by striking his head, and I take my safety distance, and I always make sure that he's alone. I am assaulted by a man with a very long stick. As soon as he attacks me, I move myself outward, so to properly control his hand, which is the one holding the stick, his right hand. Then I rush towards him to first strike his carotid like that. I control his arm and then I strike here, which creates an imbalance. If he had let go of the stick, so obviously I can strike him several times, like this, and finalize with a punch. If he's still holding the stick, in that case it's simple. I strike here, like this, using the stick, and I bring him down to the ground. And from there, I can take my distance, make sure he's alone, and especially I keep the stick with me. Et surtout, je garde le bâton.
Face à moi, l'individu
I'm
me
face to
saisit
face
les
with
deux
a man
poignets
who grabs
simultanément.
both my wrists
Je riposte
simultaneously.
par une frappe génitale.
I retaliate by striking his
Je
genitals.
reviens, je me sers
I
de
come
son
back
poignet
here and I
gauche
use his
pour
left
effectuer une frappe
wrist
sur son
to
poignet
strike his
droit pour me
right
dégager.
wrist to release
J'effectue
myself.
un revers
I
marteau
throw a
au
backhand
sternum.
hammer
Je me
punch
déplace,
to his
j'effectue
ear.
un coup de poing marteau au sternum.
I move and throw a
Je me
hammer
déplace à nouveau,
punch to his
j'effectue une
sternum.
frappe génitale.
I move
Et
again,
je
I strike his
finalise ma
genitals and I
riposte par
finalize by
un low
low
kick au
kicking his
niveau
thigh.
de sa cuisse.
Finally, I make
À
sure it's
partir de là,
safe
je
and I
m'assure
take
de
my
ma sécurité en
distance.
prenant mes distances.
Passe-moi tes thunes tout de suite, passe-moi ton
Calme,
portefeuille.
reste calme,
Passe-moi
tranquille,
ton portefeuille
j'ai
tout de
rien. Attends, je vais te le passer, mais
Passe-moi ton portefeuille.
d'accord, je te le passe,
Tout de suite.
mais reste calme. Bouge pas, bouge pas, bouge pas.
Ok, c'est bon. Passe-moi tes thunes tout de suite, passe-moi ton
Calme,
portefeuille.
reste calme,
Passe-moi
tranquille,
ton portefeuille
j'ai
tout de
rien. Attends, je vais te le passer, mais
Passe-moi ton portefeuille.
d'accord, je te le passe,
Tout de suite.
mais reste calme. Bouge pas, bouge pas, bouge pas.
I'm sitting quietly on a bench. A man comes and threatens me with a weapon. It's not every day that you get threatened. He asks me for money. I don't have any. I try to calm him down, but he insists. It's not easy to get out of this situation. So what I do is that, while talking to him, I try to calm him down. I'm going to surprise him by dodging and effectively recovering the breach firmly. Then I get the weapon from below. So I turn the weapon towards the ground, and I turn it against him. Make sure you control the situation well. Then I strike him twice with the barrel of the gun. I recover the gun and I distance myself from him. But since I was threatened by a weapon, as a result of this, I am obliged to inform the police so that they can intervene.